We've discussed in depth why these companies go woke, why almost every major company goes woke, has already gone woke long ago. And all those points still stand. But here's another reason, just as pertinent. Every institution in our country is being taken over by people who hate the institutions they're in charge of. This is true in the corporate world. This is true in government. This is especially true in the military. This is true in many of our churches. This is true even down to the level of the family, which is the most fundamental societal institution, where many families are led by mothers and fathers who have no interest in marriage or in parenting. They treat their children like pets or fashion accessories, hence the proliferation of quote unquote trans kids. So across the spectrum, you find institutions that aren't really collapsing, from any pressure from without so much as imploding. It's a controlled demolition, an intentional act of sabotage from within. Bud Light is just one example, certainly not the most significant or important. It's a symptom of an underlying thing.
We're going to cross the streams because he just talked about a controlled demolition from within, right? Remember that story we talked about a couple hours ago? Project Mockingbird, not Operation Mockingbird. That was the CIA. Project Mockingbird was JFK running some wiretaps to find out where the leak was. And Project Mockingbird was not disclosed to the public until 2007. Because if you knew about Project Mockingbird, you might suspect it had something to do with Operation Mockingbird. And you might be right. But in that line of thought, I wanted to take you to something. We had mentioned the Rockefeller Commission that was investigating those events. And I have a summary of the findings of that commission. Now, this is the New York Times. We've already talked about the New York Times tonight, so take it for what it's worth. This is a summary of Rockefeller panel's CIA report from 1975. And when you go down, it tells you what to think about these things. Fundamental issues, individual rights being violated. Woo, a lot of it. Government must obey the law, because they weren't. National security must be properly used. It wasn't. Resolving issues, these sort of things. But if you go down here, there's the actual summary. Look at all the journalism here. Here's a summary. The initial public charges were that the CIA's domestic activities, right? They're supposed to be pointed at foreign enemies, not domestic. Involved. 1, large-scale spying on American citizens in the United States by the CIA, whose responsibility is foreign intelligence. So the CIA was out of line right there. Keeping dossiers on large numbers of American citizens. Okay, maybe that's justified. Aiming these activities at Americans who have expressed their disagreement with various government policies. Oh, that's not right. Hope they stopped that back in 1975. It's still not going on today. These initial charges were subsequently supplemented by others, including allegations that the CIA, here's number 1, had intercepted and opened personal mail in the United States for 20 years, right? Because they'd only existed 20 years at that point. Had infiltrated domestic dissident groups and otherwise intervened in domestic politics. That's still going on too, right? Had engaged in illegal wiretaps and break-ins. Yeah, they still do that. Had improperly assisted other government agencies. Yeah. In addition, assertions have been made ostensibly linking the CIA to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. That's the New York Times. But you're a conspiracy theory if you read these things and understand what's been going on. Like the Snowden blowing the whistle on all the surveillance, it never stopped. The church committee hearings, this is the Rockefeller Commission. The Rockefeller family.
1975. So these are the findings, the summary findings from
Nelson Rockefeller.
1975.
Right.
But for everyone
and they
listening,
funded the
let
CIA
that
in the
sink
first
in a little
place.
bit. Correct.
The Rockefellers funded the CIA, and then when the CIA came into trouble, the Rockefeller organization investigated their own stuff, just like Alan Dulles investigated the murder that he helped to create.
They didn't just fund the CIA; they allowed for the backbone, essentially the MI6, to come in and organize and set up the foundation for what would become the OSS, which then became the CIA. And that was through Rockefeller's own property in the 1930s.
We're talking about this woke agenda, where it comes from. We're seeing these intelligence agencies involved, right? So now if the intelligence agencies had something to do with the universities from which the woke agenda was germinated, fertilized, and disseminated, we might be onto something. Who might be pulling the strings of people like the Budweiser CEO
Well,
who
that's
worked for
Reese
the
Committee,
CIA?
because that's the
right?
educational element, and the Church Committee, Rockefeller Commission, shows you the sort of weaponization of the CIA and various methods that they've been employing to destabilize areas.
Now, I probably have 10 books on this topic, but I got 2, and let's see what I got. I got no, this one. This is not one of them, but you should know about it. Secret History of Oxford University. But it would lead to things like the Cultural Cold War, the CIA, and the world of arts and letters. You know, MI6 taught them to get involved with the university system so they could communize this country from the inside out. You'd have Cloak and Gown, Scholars in America's Secret War. Like, this is 300 pages of legit facts on how the intelligence agencies, OSS, CIA, MI6, Mossad, were all up in our universities to precipitate next generation turnover into communism. There's compromised campus, there's
compromised
universities
campus.
and empire, there's imperial brain trust. There's a whole bunch of books on the fact that they were doing this, taking over the university system and bringing in this liberal Frankfurt School, Marxism, identity politics
Cultural
situation.
Marxism.
And it used to be kind of like laughable. You'd see people making these arguments. You're like, whatever. But it's not funny when there's a lot of people believing it, but not understanding anything about it. It's just a religious belief at that point.
It's like watching
transubstantiation.
Yeah, it's like watching a religion from the foundation get started. So like we're born into a world with well-established religions, but to sort of watch one that's sort of in its nascent phase, not that it's really nascent. I mean, it was given birth in the 1930s, so to speak, with the Frankfurt School and critical theory. But now the instantiation in culture, instantiation manifestation, taking it from the conceptual realm to actually embodying it in cultural behavior, has become overly explicit. And most people are still trying to figure out what are the names and terms and concepts that we associate with these ideas, when in fact they've been argued for and talked about in philosophic circles and universities for decades and decades, but no one knew this was really going on. This was one of Peterson's big warnings when he first came out. They infiltrated most of the universities, particularly the liberal arts colleges of most universities. And that's actually part and parcel of the Reese Committee findings.
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing. The social sciences, the teachers' college, they essentially got to both primary education as well as
what you call the teachers' college is Columbia University. Which originally was King's College. It's a British Empire college.
Right.
And so we're, I think, the original 7 schools. I think that's why they call it the Ivy League, because they're the original 7 schools. Well, maybe not Yale. Wasn't set up under the crown, but John Harvard's work was. Yeah. And William and Mary,
Yale has significant.
And Rutgers is Queen's College.
Yep, Queen's
and
College.
It's in New Jersey. So there's still a lingering remnant, even though they rebranded it.
And Yale has significant connections with obviously Skull and Bones. So it's not like it's 6 degrees of separation from the crown. Let's put it that way.
So it was founded under the crown because it's 1700s, I think, Yale. But your point about Skull and Bones, what people need to understand, like the connection that needs to be made, is the Boston Brahmins, which there's a caste system that was emulated by English-speaking people, and the rich people of Boston, the shipping magnates, the slave traders, all these people, they considered themselves the highest caste, so they're called the Boston Brahmins. Actually, let me take you to the history blueprint. That way you've got some references, because otherwise it just sounds too far out. Let me type in Brahmin, Boston Brahmins. Here's the first families of Boston. The Delano family. Oh, Ben Bradley of the Washington Post. His family is part of that. The Cabot family, the Choate family, the Holmes family, the Forbes family, Lowell family, Peabody Perkins, the Whitney family, right? The Whitneys founded Skull and Bones. And the Forbes Carey family participated in that. And so did the Delano family. And so did the Bradley family. So there's a bunch of people making money from opium back in the day. Just like the Fleming family. Ian Fleming's grandfather was a merchant banker who was a billionaire who made money from the opium trade. Subjugation of China, by the way. Yeah. Right? These are the same people who were powerful enough to conduct the American side of the operation against Kennedy, because they They influence through the Georgetown set, which is the intelligence and statecraft group that's on their side, right? So you've got the old China trade, and that's simply the opium trade.
Yeah.
And you could also, this is where free trade comes from. The idea of free trade right here comes from the old China trade. So the old China trade is the opium trade. That's what funded Yale University in the first place. Elihu Yale was a member of the East India Company, and he set up Yale in America as this Anglo-American university. And then in 1832, the East India Company privatized opium. And so now you could have privateers doing that work. Jardine Matheson, which later is Jardine Fleming, because they partner with the Fleming family in 1976. Skull and Bones, the Carey family, which was the Forbes family back then. The Whitneys, right? Richard Whitney and other people in the Russell family. Where's the Russells? Are they over here? So anyway, there's old family money involved in black marketeering. So when you see Air America and they're smuggling some drugs, or you see Afghanistan and they're smuggling some drugs, they've been doing this a long time. It's the power behind the crowns. It's the power behind the presidents. There's a lot of history to it. And if you just would, take some time to be educated about any of these types of things, you wouldn't have to say, that's conspiracy theory that FDR's family was in the opium trade, or that John Kerry's family was in the opium trade. But that's what Skull and Bones is there to do. It's a German secret society that became prominent through privateer opium money to continue training a ruling class and hold their advantage.
Yeah. It's for the training of a ruling class, like an aristocracy,
like a Mandarin class. Yeah.
A Mandarin class that exactly that then would engage in statecraft and politics, and this go through a revolving door of various families that support the same types of agendas. That's where you get the Bushes and the Clintons and the Obamas and so forth.
And then if you look at the librarians of Congress, there's been a Skull and Bones and I think 2 Rhodes Scholars. So it's like there's a controlling lineage of the people and the documents and the secrets they keep away from everyone else in order to have power.
But they document it for themselves.
And Kennedy assassination is the great granddaddy of that whole thing, because it's the Rosetta Stone of the people who rose to power. As an example, there's a January 22nd. Here it is. We go to the history blueprint. January 22nd, 1963, 11 months before Kennedy's killed. There's a photograph of the Operation 40 CIA crew in Mexico City that includes Porter Goss, Barry Seal, Felix Rodriguez, Tosh Plumley, and others. Porter Goss went to Yale. He was in Book and Snake. Let's go here. Let's see. Krongard, Fence Club. He was in the Fence Club. Where's his secret society? I think it was called Book and Snake right here.
Yep. So
Porter Goss is in Yale's, not Skull and Bones. This is a different secret society at Yale. It's the Book and Snake. And so he's in there with Porter Goss is in there with William H.T. Bucky Bush, George Bush's uncle. And this other guy, John Negroponte. And Negroponte and Goss are prominent and get promoted through 9/11.
Yep.
So it's like if you're the
key components, essentially,
if you're the third line player in a hockey metaphor, you're the third line player in 1963. By 1999 and 2000, 2001, you're the first line players, right? These guys were groomed under the people who got away with killing Kennedy. And then they inherited Iran, Contra, BCCI, all these things that came the generation later.
Yep.
And then they turned it over to people like Jerry Bremer, who works for the Carnegie and Carnegie and Kissinger and not Carnegie, but Marshall McLennan. And so there's a lineage between these people, right? Kissinger and Negroponte groomed Bremer, and working at Kissinger Associates. If you read Dope Inc., that's the East India Company's inheritance in America, Kissinger Associates. They're running the dope trade, according to that book. A supra-governmental entity that is super powerful. Now, somebody in Kissinger Associates named David Rothkopf, he wrote a book called Superclass. that tells you there's 5,000 people that are not elected and they're running the world. So, and he's also a CFR member. But I'm just saying the general public that think that Oswald shot Kennedy, what about all the other information that is available on these things? Like if the CIA didn't exist and the CIA didn't have covert op killing teams and the CIA didn't have a grudge against Kennedy and if Kennedy hadn't fired Dulles, then maybe I believe Oswald did the thing. But when you got all these other things and then you're asking me to believe, oh, Oswald showed up and checked off all their boxes. Like there was a grudge between Charles Cable, who JFK fired. Well, Cable's brother's the police chief in Dallas. It sounds like if you want to arrange somebody's demise, you might want to have control over the press. Ted Dealey owned the newspaper, is Dealey Plaza, and the police chief is the brother of the guy that JFK just fired with Dulles and those guys.
Dismissing Alan Dulles.
Right.
Because of what happened with the Bay of Pigs and the shenanigans going on. Yeah.
It's almost like if Oswald wasn't there, Kennedy would have died anyway that day.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems like it.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions. We can get into the show, we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.